Frontier Echoes brings you another forgotten tale from the old American West. A story of destiny, promises, unexpected love, and a single sentence that changed a lonely rancher's life forever. It is said that on the frontier, the wind carries secrets, fate walks on dusty trails, and sometimes the woman you've been waiting for is not the one the world expected. Today's story begins with a man who waited years for a bride he had never met, and an Apache woman who stood before him one evening and said the words that shattered everything he thought he knew. "It's not a mistake. I'm yours." His name was Caleb Mercer, a 36-year-old rancher living near the foothills of the Mogollon Rim. Hard-working, kind-hearted, but hopelessly unlucky in finding a partner. Caleb had grown up believing that someday he'd share his small ranch with a wife who'd ride beside him, cook beside him, laugh beside him, maybe raise a few kids under the wide Arizona sky. But the frontier was unforgiving. Years passed. Women in town either married someone else, left for the east, or simply didn't notice the quiet rancher who rarely spoke unless spoken to. Caleb eventually reached a point where he accepted the silence in his house as part of life. But deep inside, he still wished for someone to walk through that door and call it home. One spring, after much convincing from the local pastor, Caleb agreed to something he'd never imagined he would. He sent a letter to an arranged marriage agency in St. Louis. They promised to find him a respectable woman willing to travel west and begin a new life with him. Caleb wasn't sure if this was romantic or pathetic, but he answered truthfully about his ranch, his simple income, and the kind of life he could offer. Months later, a letter finally arrived. A woman named Eleanor Whitley had accepted. She was 28, widowed, educated, and ready to start fresh. She would travel by stagecoach and arrive in late June. Caleb read her letter so many times the ink nearly faded. He cleaned the cabin, fixed the barn roof, repainted the fence, even bought new clothes from Clearwater. For the first time in years, the quiet rancher felt a spark of hope in his chest. The date of her arrival drew closer. Every morning, Caleb checked the ridge, hoping to see a coach in the far distance. He told himself not to get too excited, but his heart didn't listen. June arrived, hot and dry. The coach was due in 3 days. Caleb's stomach twisted with nerves. Would she like him? Would she hate the rough frontier life? Would she feel safe here? He had no answers. But fate didn't wait for the stagecoach. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the red hills, Caleb heard rustling near the creek. His horse, Ranger, lifted its head and snorted. Caleb grabbed his rifle, not out of fear, but out of caution. Rustlers, coyotes, even wandering drifters came through these parts. He walked down the slope toward the sound. The air was still, golden with final daylight. As he neared the water, he saw her, an Apache woman kneeling beside the creek, washing blood from her arm. Her long black hair hung in thick braids, and her clothes were torn as if she had been running through brush for miles. At first, she didn't notice him. Caleb lowered his rifle. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She snapped her head up. Her eyes were fierce, alert, ready to fight or flee. She didn't move at first, her hand hovering near a small knife. "You're bleeding," Caleb said again, softer this time. The woman hesitated, then allowed him to step closer. She wasn't afraid, just cautious. Proud. Strong. "My name's Caleb Mercer," he said. "I don't mean you harm." The woman finally spoke, voice calm but tired. "Naira." Caleb wrapped her arm carefully with cloth from his saddlebag. She watched his hands with quiet curiosity. "You been traveling long?" he asked. Naira nodded. 3 days. No food. No water. Running. From what? She didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the hills, as if expecting something to appear at any second. Caleb didn't push her. He simply said, "You're safe here. Come up to the cabin. I'll get you something to eat." Naira followed him, but not too closely, just enough to show she trusted him a little. Inside the cabin, Caleb made stew, offered her water, and set out bread. She ate in silence, studying everything around her. The tools on the wall. The old photograph of Caleb's parents. The freshly made bed in the corner. The second bed he had prepared for Eleanor. "You expecting someone?" Naira asked quietly. Caleb nodded, feeling awkward. "My bride. She's supposed to arrive in a few days." Naira's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered for a moment. Something silent passed through her gaze, something he couldn't name. After eating, she said she would leave at sunrise. Caleb insisted she rest. That night, the desert wind howled softly. Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why fate had brought an Apache woman to his doorstep just days before his future was supposed to begin. Something about her presence felt important. Like a puzzle piece that didn't yet make sense. Morning came. Naira stepped outside, preparing to leave, but she stopped abruptly. Horse tracks, fresh. Moving toward the ranch, not away. She stiffened. Caleb saw her eyes narrow and knew instantly she recognized the tracks. "Who are you running from, Naira?" Before she could answer, 6 riders appeared on the ridge. Not Apache, Caleb saw that instantly. These men were outlaws, rough-looking, carrying rifles. Their horses descended the slope quickly. Naira whispered, "They want me." "Not you." Caleb stepped in front of her without hesitation. "Stay behind me." The outlaws circled the ranch yard. Their leader, a scarred man with a crooked grin, tipped his hat. "We're looking for a woman," he said. "You seen any pass this way?" Caleb shook his head. "No one but me." The outlaw smirked. "Funny, 'cause her tracks lead straight here." Caleb's stomach twisted. But he didn't move. "There's no one here for you." The man leaned forward in his saddle. "We want her alive. Make this easy." Caleb had faced wolves, storms, and droughts. But never 6 armed men while protecting someone he barely knew. And yet, he didn't budge. He reached for his rifle. "Get off my land." For a moment, the world froze. Then the outlaw raised his gun. A shot rang out. A single arrow flew from behind the cabin and struck the outlaw's hand, sending his gun flying. Naira stood tall, bow lifted, eyes blazing. Before the other men could react, she loosed 2 more arrows, disarming them with astonishing precision. Caleb fired a warning shot. The gang panicked and fled, riding off in a cloud of dust. Silence returned. Caleb turned to Naira. She looked breathless, fierce, alive. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved mine first," she replied. Something deep shifted between them in that moment, something that felt like destiny tapping on a locked door. Hours later, she finally told him the truth. Her husband had died the previous winter. A group of outlaw scouts had attacked her clan, and Naira escaped with vital information. They chased her because she knew something they wanted to hide. Caleb listened quietly. Then said, "You can stay here as long as you need." Naira looked around the cabin again. At the bed. At the little bouquet he had placed on the table for Eleanor. Then at Caleb, the man who stood between her and death without hesitating. "What kind of woman are you waiting for?" she asked. Caleb sighed. "A decent one. Someone who'll want a quiet life with me. I don't know if she'll even like it here." "You don't know if you will like her," Naira said with surprising certainty. Caleb blinked. I haven't thought about that." "You wait for a woman you never met," Naira continued. "But you don't see what is here." Her words unsettled something inside his chest. That evening, as golden light flowed through the cabin window, Naira stepped closer to him. So close he could hear her breath. She placed her hand lightly on his arm. "You think you wait for the right woman," she said softly. "But sometimes, the right woman finds you first." Caleb felt a strange warmth rising in him. A dangerous one. A gentle one. Something he had spent years pushing away. "Naira," he whispered. "You being here, it's not how things were supposed to go." She looked into his eyes, fearless, steady, beautiful. Then she said the words that broke the future he thought he had planned. "It's not a mistake. I'm yours." Caleb froze. Those words echoed through him like distant thunder. His bride-to-be hadn't even arrived. She was still miles away. And yet here, right in front of him, stood a woman who had risked her life, fought for him, trusted him, and saw through him in ways no one ever had. "You don't even know me," Caleb managed to say. Naira shook her head gently. "I know enough. I know your heart. I know your courage. I know you protect without asking anything back. A woman can feel truth even before a man speaks it." Caleb felt his breath tremble. "What about your clan?" "I will return to them," she said. "But I do not belong there anymore. My place is where my heart feels safe." "And that's here?" Naira nodded. "With you." The world outside seemed to silence itself. Only the warm wind moved. Caleb lifted her hand slowly, as if afraid she might vanish with one wrong gesture. "I don't know what kind of husband I'd be," he whispered. Naira smiled softly. "A true one." Before he could respond, the distant sound of a stagecoach echoed from the trail. Eleanor Whitley was arriving. Caleb and Naira exchanged a long, heavy look. Destiny had shown him two paths at the exact same moment, one chosen by letters, the other chosen by fate. Caleb walked slowly toward the porch. Naira followed. The stagecoach stopped at the fence line. Eleanor stepped out, dressed in fine traveling clothes, elegant, poised, everything a man from back east might dream of. But Caleb felt nothing in his chest, not the spark he felt with Naira, not the fire, not the pull of fate. Eleanor walked toward him with a polite smile. "Mr. Mercer, I presume?" Caleb looked at Naira, then back at Eleanor. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm Caleb Mercer." Eleanor glanced at Naira with curiosity. "And who is she?" Caleb hesitated for only one heartbeat. "My future," he said softly. Eleanor's eyebrows lifted. She wasn't angry, just surprised. She had traveled far, but she was wise enough to see she was stepping into the middle of something powerful. She extended her hand gracefully. "Then I wish you both happiness." "Truly." Caleb thanked her, offered her a meal and a horse to continue her journey. Before leaving, Eleanor looked at Naira and said, "He made a good choice." Naira watched the coach roll away, then turned to Caleb. "You are sure?" Caleb nodded. "Everything in me says yes." Naira stepped closer, resting her head gently on his chest. Caleb held her, feeling, for the first time in his life, complete. That night, beneath the silver moon and the warm desert wind, Caleb and Naira sat outside the cabin, shoulder to shoulder. No fear, no doubt, no hesitation. Only the quiet certainty that fate had done its work. He had waited for a bride who never belonged to him. And the woman who did belong to him, had walked out of the wild and into his life at the exact right moment. This is Frontier Echoes, and this was the story of the rancher who waited for a bride, until destiny arrived early and spoke the words that changed his life forever. If you want more Wild West stories like this, raw, emotional, and rooted in true frontier spirit, stay close. More tales are riding your way soon.